Welcome back, and joining me now is Republican Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky. Senator Paul, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. I wish the news were better. We are having this conversation against the backdrop of yet another American tragedy, yet another mass shooting. What was your reaction to learning about the mass shooting at Brown University, and what do you want people to know about that today?
You know, I was just at Brown a few weeks ago. I gave a speech at the political union, got to meet, several hundred of their students, had a great interaction with them. So kind of feels more personal because I hope it wasn't, nobody deserves to die, but I hope it wasn't any of the students that I met or that I know. But yeah, just a tragedy. And I think, our prayers go out to the families of those who were injured and those who were killed.
Absolutely. I do have to ask you about what is being called a terror attack overnight in Australia, targeting the Jewish community at a Hanukkah celebration. Senator, do you believe the United States needs to be on heightened alert in the wake of what happened in Australia?
I'm not sure. I don't know if I know enough about that attack yet, but it doesn't sound good. There does seem to be a rise of anti-Semitism around the world, in our country as well. And I think really it emphasizes that, what our founders talked about. Our founders talked about that, in order for democracy to thrive, in order to have freedom, you had to have virtue. That really you have to have this idea of self-restraint. There has to be among the people an ability to obey the law and to know right from wrong. Think about it. I ask audiences this all the time. If there were no laws against stealing, who would steal? And, of course, no one raises their hands, but I think that's pretty well true, that the vast majority of us don't steal because we think it's wrong. The vast majority of us don't kill because we think it's wrong. But when a society loses a sense of right and wrong, then there's great danger for everyone.
Well, and speaking of danger, I do have to ask you about this attack in Syria. 2 U.S. service members and 1 civilian interpreter were killed. 3 other troops wounded in an ambush by an ISIS gunman. The president is threatening, quote, very serious retaliation for the attack. You are a part of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Do you support the president, the United States, retaliating what happened in Syria, Senator?
Well, the soldiers who died are obviously heroes fighting for their country. The purpose of whether or not they should be there or not, though, is a big question. In the first Trump administration, Trump proposed removing those troops, and the neocons around him, the traditional conservatives around him, said, oh, no, we won't let you. They actually passed a law trying to prevent him from removing troops from Syria. I was with the president in the first administration that a couple of hundred troops in Syria are more of a tripwire than a strategic asset. I don't think they deter war. I think they basically, because Americans are targets and jihadists around the world think they can get great glory and provoke terrorism by killing an American, that they become potential targets and tripwires to more interaction. Yes, the people who killed our soldiers should be punished, but really we need to reassess whether or not we should have troops in Syria to begin with.
Okay, let's talk about some domestic issues now. Senator, health care being really at the top of the list. Senate Republicans, including yourself, rejected Democrats' health care plan that would have extended Obamacare tax credits. This effectively means 22 million Americans could see their health insurance premiums skyrocket next year if there is no deal, including 100,000 Kentuckians. Senator, what do you say to your constituents who will likely pay a whole lot more for their health care and who feel as though there's blame to go around on everyone?
I think the question we have to ask is, what are premiums doing with or without the Obamacare subsidies? With the subsidies for the last 15 years, the curve of premiums has been up. Every time more subsidies are given, the premiums rise even faster. So we have a steep curve of rising premiums that is because of the artificial demand. Part of it's because of the artificial demand. But we also have to ask who the subsidies are going to. And if I ask my fellow Kentuckians whether someone making $100,000 a year should get $13,000 in subsidies for insurance, most of them are aghast. They think of someone who makes $100,000 a year as being well off. But it's not just that. If you make $200,000 a year, you get over $1,000 a year in subsidies. Why in any plan would somebody making $200,000 a year get money from the government? So none of the plans that have been proposed other than mine will bring down prices. My plan is this. Let people in the individual market, the Obamacare market, which is about 4% of America, a small number of people, let them buy their insurance through Costco, Sam's Club, Amazon. And what would happen is once you get to a large enough size, let's say you had a couple of million people buy their insurance together, they'd be bigger than any corporation in America, but they'd no longer be stuck with an individual plan. They would get group insurance. They would probably have their negotiators sit down with the CEO of United Healthcare, and they would get a one-on-one meeting, and they would get to demand good insurance at a good price. Right now, if you're a small entity, small business with 2 or 3 workers, you have no leverage. It's take it or leave it. And take it or leave it has meant rising premiums. So my plan, all it requires, doesn't require any money. Just says legalize people to buy insurance across state lines, legalize people to have a co-op or a collective buy the insurance for them.
Just very quickly, though, and I know you have your own plan. Your fellow Republicans don't support your plan. Why not extend the Obamacare subsidies while you are working out a plan where there is broader agreement?
Well, actually, I do have quite a bit of support in the Republican side, and I'm hoping to convince Democrats on this. President Trump supported it in his first administration. I just exchanged some text messages with the president in the last couple of weeks. He still supports this. This is the one thing that could bring it down. Extending the subsidies keeps the prices up. And most Republicans I know, myself included, are not willing to give money to rich people. Okay. Or to rich insurance companies. It hasn't worked, and somebody making $200,000 shouldn't get money from somebody making $50,000 a year.
All right.
It's just a bad system. It was rotten from the beginning. And here's the thing is, if the subsidies expire, it's 15% of the subsidies. 85% of the subsidies that have been there since 2010 continue on.
It still could impact some 22 million people. I do want to turn to Venezuela, though. This is an issue where you've been quite outspoken. As you know, this week, the administration seized an oil tanker off its coast with reports that more seizures could be coming. This comes, of course, as President Trump has been warning Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro's days, quote, could be numbered. Do you think the United States is on the verge of war with Venezuela, Senator?
One of the things I liked about Donald Trump when he ran for office was he was against the regime change in Iraq, against regime change in Libya. But I'm concerned about this, and I think there are people around him influencing him. I think his instincts still are against war, but I think he's become more interested in regime change in Venezuela because of the prodding of the Secretary of State and others who have aggressively wanted regime change. Regime change, unfortunately, doesn't always work out. Look, I have no like for Maduro. I wrote a book called The Case Against Socialism about how bad things are in Venezuela. So I wish and hope for better government down there. But you don't know what you get. It could be the drug cartels take over. Could be that other generals take over. But the bottom line is the people there need to fight for their liberty, and it really isn't the job of America. I mean, the president also said, well, be careful, Colombia, you could be next. I mean, if we're going to go and topple regime after regime in South America, there's no amount of money that can be printed to pay for that. And I don't think that the lives should be lost without a vote by Congress and the people approving of this. That's what our Constitution intended.
Okay. Final question on domestic policy, on redistricting. President Trump is threatening to primary, as you know, all of the Indiana lawmakers who voted against his redistricting plan, the new map that would have benefited Republicans. Do you support Republicans trying to redraw maps-decade?
It's this escalation on both sides. Both sides are doing it. And so is one side going to sit quietly and not do it? You can argue who started it. But I do think this, and this is on the negative aspect of both parties doing this. I think that it's going to lead to more civil tension and possibly more violence in our country. Because think about it. If 35% of Texas is Democrat, solidly Democrat, and they have zero representation, or like in my state, we're a very Republican state, but we have one Democrat area in Louisville, and we have a Democrat congressman. We could carve up Louisville and get rid of that one congressman. But how does that make Democrats feel? I think it makes them feel like they're not represented. And so I don't know. I think it's bad, but it's really not one party or the other doing it. It's both parties have been doing it since the beginning of time. But in general, when it becomes so extreme, like if California has no Republican representatives after this is done or has one left, I think that makes people so dissatisfied they think, well, the electoral process isn't working anymore. Maybe we have to resort to other means. And I don't want that. And I think both parties it could happen to. But I think we need to be aware of and think about that before we do all of this.
Senator, I have to follow up with you because what you're saying is very significant. You're saying that you are concerned redistricting could lead to more political violence?
I'm concerned if there are no representatives, like no Republican representatives in California or no Democrats in Texas, that it will be so thoroughly one-sided that people will feel like their vote isn't counting. And so I think it's a mistake. But I'm not saying it's a mistake of the Republicans. I'm saying it's a mistake of both parties. And I don't know exactly how we de-escalate this, because once, Texas is done and changed 5 seats to be more Republican, California's going to do the same thing. And it's back and forth and back and forth. And how do you put the genie back in the box? I mean, how do you get back to détente? I mean, how do you do something better? But I think there is the potential that when people have no representation, that they feel disenfranchised, that it can lead and might lead to violence in our country.
All right, Senator Rand Paul, thank you so much. Covered a lot of ground this morning. We really appreciate your being here.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.